Hi, it's now time for Chapter 2 of The Flapper Wife by Beatrice Burton. Hey, if you want me to read any of these dressed as a flapper, just comment me and I'll do it. Alright, Chapter 2. Gloria's first thought the next morning was, "This is my wedding day." Her second was, "This is the last morning I shall have to wake up in this dingy old room, thank goodness." She hated everything in it, from the battered brass bed to the imitation ivory toilet set. By tomorrow morning she would be the wife of a man who could buy her wonderful things. A toilet set of silver, perfumes, lacy handkerchiefs, chiffon stockings too thin ever to be mended. She had made up her mind that her honeymoon would be a shopping trip too, with Dick to pay the bills. "Sweetheart," Dick had said, "let's honeymoon in some quiet place where we can be alone." But she had laughed him to scorn. "Don't you know you can be lonelier in a big city than anywhere else in the world, silly?" she had asked. "I've decided on Montreal. It's romantic, but it's full of lovely shops and restaurants. And we shall stop at the Ritz, and be very smart and ritzy." Dick had laughed, and she had her way. So when a certain train rolled across the country that November night, Mr. and Mrs. Richard Gregory were on it. Their drawing room was packed with bride's roses. "You're like a rose yourself, my little Gloria, all mine at last," Dick murmured. His arms held her close, his eager lips pressed down hungrily upon hers that were so smooth and cool. Her honeymoon was the most wonderful time of Gloria's life. She slept the mornings away, and breakfasted elegantly at noon. In the afternoons she and Dick hired a fiacre to take them far up into the steep road to Mount Royal, or out into the country. They ate in quaint little French restaurants, and Gloria shopped. She bought beads and earrings and more than a dozen bottles of French perfume, while Dick stayed in the hotel reading. Gloria had never known anyone who read so much as he. "For a rising young lawyer, you're quite a highbrow, it seems to me," she said one morning. She was lying back in a long chair, while the hotel hairdresser marcelled her reddish gold hair. She laughed almost scornfully. Dick made no answer. He sat down and picked up a book, only to put it down. He filled his pipe and laid it unlighted on the dresser. "Come here, restless soul, I want to talk to you." Gloria held out to him a slim hand. "Do you know it's awfully cold outdoors? I nearly froze yesterday. I need a coat. I'd like a fur one. I've been looking at one in that little shop down the street." Her voice trailed off. The hairdresser had finished her work and was putting her iron and brushes away in a little black bag. Gloria paid her. The moment the door had closed behind her, Dick came across the room. He put his hands under Gloria's elbows, holding her away from him. "Look here, please don't have people hanging around here all the time," he said. "You're beautiful enough without having your hair curled every time the wind blows. I want you alone, all to myself." With sudden passion he pulled her to him, and kissed her eyelids, her mouth, the little hollow of her throat. "Wonderful, beautiful," he said. His voice was choked and queer. Gloria could feel the beating of his heart against her own, and the quivering of his hands. With one of her own she pushed him away from her. She smoothed down her ruffled hair. "Do you think you can afford the coat? It's $400, the one I want, dear," she said coolly. "It's a jacket of Siberian squirrel." She laced her fingers at the back of his neck and held her face up to his. "Say you'll get it for me," she said. Without a word, Dick nodded and turned away. He picked up his pipe and his book. "I'm going down to the men's lounge for a while," he said shortly. "I'll meet you at the elevator at 2. We'll hunt up a new place for lunch, shall we?" And so it happened that the new Mrs. Gregory came home from her honeymoon wearing a costly fur coat, fragrant with scent. They went to dinner that first night with Dick's father and mother in the old homestead. "Roly-poly pudding," said Dick, when Maggie the maid brought in the dessert. "I'll bet Mother made it just for me." "She certainly did," answered old Mr. Gregory. Mrs. Gregory beamed at Gloria. "Dick sometimes has nervous indigestion, as you probably know, my dear," she said in her rich contralto voice. "And when he has an attack, I always cook everything for him myself, very carefully. You undoubtedly will, too." "I can't cook," Gloria said in a very small voice. "I can't cook at all." Mother Gregory frowned. Then her wide brow cleared. "You will learn," she smiled comfortably. "You will learn." And Gloria smiled back with her ripe lips. But there was no smile in her amber eyes. They were like pools of water that no sunlight has warmed. She would never learn to cook. She would never be a household drudge, her hands shriveled with washing dishes, her nails broken, her dresses smudged with pastry flour. If Dick's mother thought this was the kind of girl her son had married, she was jolly well mistaken. Gloria widened her eyes. She turned to Mother Gregory. "By the way, I'll need a cook right away," she said sweetly. "I wonder if Maggie would know of anyone who wants a place. If Dick has a weak stomach, my efforts at cooking would kill him most likely." After dinner, she and Dick walked home to the new house. It was white with green shutters, and it nestled among the evergreens that surrounded it. Everything in it was fresh and new. Dick and she had spent happy months buying furniture for it. "I say, Gloria, I wonder if we can afford a cook," Dick began the first of what Gloria later called his economy sermons. They had just come into the little house. Gloria switched on the lights and sighed with joy. The house with its Chinese rugs and yellow silk curtains was a dream come true. "Afford a cook? Why, of course we can afford a cook," she said. It was absurd that a successful lawyer couldn't afford a cook for his wife. "I'm not so sure," Dick said. He set their bags on the floor and dropped into a chair. "You see, dearest," he went on, "the furniture isn't quite paid for, and our honeymoon sent $1,000 to the Four Winds. Then there was the fur coat I gave you. Well, for goodness sake, what did you want to get married for if you couldn't afford to keep up a home?" Gloria asked with sudden fury. She was tired, and she was sure that Dick's mother hated her. "Your mother thinks that I ought to spend my whole life cooking, so you think so too. Well, I'm not going to. D'you hear? I'm not going to fry all the color out of my cheeks, standing over a red-hot stove for hours and days and years." Gloria's voice rose into a scream. Then she burst into wild sobbing and ran upstairs. She threw herself on the bed in their room and waited for Dick to come to her. She wanted him to comfort her, to forgive her, and to tell her she could have a cook. But he didn't come. She listened. No step on the stairs. Then Gloria began to laugh. Not as she had ever laughed before in all her life, but with great gasps that shook her from head to foot. And as she laughed, tears rolled down her face. All at once she was aware of Dick standing at the foot of the bed. He had a big pitcher in his hands. Then she felt the sting of ice water in her face. It choked and blinded her. But she went on laughing and crying. She tried to stop, but she couldn't stop. Now, I'm going to continue part 2 of chapter 2 in the next video, because I'm limited to 10 minutes and I only have like several seconds left. So then we'll pick this up in the next video. Thanks for listening.